Welcome back to The Practical Woodsman. I'm Rut, creator and host of The Practical Woodsman. That's right, it's my super duper genius which brought this all into existence. Boy, I sure kicked up a hornet's nest this past week. A lot of guys got hairs in their biscuits over some things I had to say, namely that a person by himself cannot live simply by hunting, and living off the land. So we're going to talk about that and some other interesting things. Stick around, we've got to do the musical introduction first. I'll be right here when that ends. Well, the way that this started was that I did a little video short for The Practical Woodsman on YouTube and some other platforms where I talked about how interesting it is when you see these quote-unquote bushcrafters and survival guys show you a pack loadout. What do they call them? My gear pack out, or my gear loadout. And what they do is they take these little like military backpacks, don't they? And they cram them to the top. I mean, you can't fit another thing in there. And then they hike through the woods for a little bit, and they stop. They set up the camera, and they point the camera down toward the ground. And they show you all the stuff that they've got in their backpack. Well, I've got this poncho here. I can make a survival shelter out of that. And here's the water bottle I use. And this is my hatchet. And this is my this. And this is my that. And this is my other thing. And if you'll notice, not in any of those that I've ever seen is there any food. The interesting thing about it being packed to the brim with this really cool and fancy gear is that you could not fit food in there even if you wanted to. So they're showing you how useful this pack is, but they've not left any room for food. Now, these are supposed to be survival packs, right? Bug out bags, emergency packs, and those sorts of things. No food. No food. So let's say that you do an internet search. You want to see a video, like you're thinking about throwing together your own survival pack, your own bug out bag or something like that. And so you do a search on the internet and their video comes up and you go, oh yeah, that gear would be really useful to have, and what a nice pack that is. Well, the problem is that if you intend on carrying food for your emergency pack, half of that gear is not going to fit in there. So it doesn't matter how cool the gear is, you're not going to be able to carry it because it's got to make way for food. So that was my whole argument. Here come the replies. Hunting, somebody says. Another person said, live off the land. There are ways to do it if you know how. Somebody else says, my pack includes the ways to acquire food. Mine's got spearheads and a custom aluminum small game trap. A custom aluminum small game trap. Another person says, my packs typically include metal spearheads and trident heads, plus a low cal rifle and high cal rifle. He's carrying 2 rifles and spearheads. Am I the only one here who is living in reality? I must be. It seems to be the rule rather than the exception that people would rather be left alone to believe in their fantasy rather than understanding the true nature of a thing. So don't mess up my fantasy, because the way my fantasy is working in my head is so cool, I don't want to hear anything that challenges it. I don't want to know what the true nature of hiking along with a pack is. I want to be left alone to imagine this fantasy, ridiculous rainbows and unicorns story going on in my head instead. And people will get mad. People get mad at me. Well, here's the interesting thing. They get mad at me, and because they're mad at me, they accuse me of being mad at them. I'm not mad at you. Do whatever you want. But when I try to express to you the true nature of these things, and your response is to get defensive and angry at me, the only thing I can assume that's going on there is that You want to live in fantasy la-la land, and you're not interested in knowing the true nature of these things. Do you have any idea how heavy it would be to do like this guy in this comment says? Carry 2 rifles, spearheads, gaming traps, and what else? Yeah, he's carrying traps, rifles, spearheads, and then he's carrying a bunch of other gear, isn't he? Like shelter, hopefully he's carrying some kind of way to keep warm if it's wintertime. Hopefully he's carrying water bottles, things like that, things where he can boil water and things of that nature. These people, I'm telling you, none of these people in these comments have walked more than 5 miles with that pack on their back. They have not. They might have walked a mile with all that stuff. They have not walked 5 miles. They've certainly not walked 10 miles. And I guarantee they have not walked 20 miles with that stuff on their back, because a person does not really have an understanding of the nature of weight, the way weight works in any situation, until you've traveled with it for a while. That's why the backpackers have the saying, an ounce is a pound. An ounce is a pound. Well, you putting together a pack, throwing it over your shoulder, and walking from here to the end of your driveway and back does not give you a proper sense of what that weight is going to feel like after 2 miles, and certainly not after 5 miles. So the whole thing is just absolutely ridiculous, but let's talk about it. I come from a family of hunters, all right? I'm not talking completely ignorantly here. I come from a family of hunters. I have hunted. I've also traveled long distances on foot with a pack on my back on a regular basis. I do it multiple times a year, every year. I've been doing it for 20 years. I grew up fishing every day of my life, frog gigging, catching snapping turtles, having them as stew. I can identify, and this is not me tooting my own horn, all right? I'm just establishing my knowledge on this matter. I can identify and use more wild edibles than people who have studied botany in universities. I actually went into the woods with a botanist on a backpacking trip, and he was amazed at the wild edibles I was able to point out to him. In fact, he said something like, my goodness, I went to school for botany, and I don't know these things. So when I say that it's not practical or real, this idea of preparing an emergency bag with the intention of just living off just what you catch, kill, or find in the woods, and you come back with, nuh-uh, I could do it, or nuh-uh, if you know what you're doing, it's possible, I immediately know you have no idea what you're talking about. So a lot of people, like I said, got hairs in their biscuits this week when I talked about these bushcrafters doing these types of videos where here's an awesome survival bag, the way I've got it together, with the idea that you're going to look up their video and you're going to get ideas for your own survival pack or your bug out bag or your emergency bag, these gear pack outs. And throughout the entire video, there's no food. And like I said before, a candy bar does not count. What does count? 3 days worth of food minimum is what counts. You have to have at least 3 days worth of food, of breakfasts, lunches, and suppers, plural, for that to be an effective and well-prepared bug-out bag, survival bag, emergency bag. It's just the way it is. We are not living in mid-1700s Kentucky, which we will talk about here in a little bit. But let's talk about seasons. Late spring and early summer are the seasons of abundance here in the United States. And it's not even possible then. It's not even possible in late spring and early summer for one guy or one girl to go out on foot, traveling, and catch or find all their food in the woods. It is not possible. And so, back to these comments on that video. Nuh-uh, you can do it. Nuh-uh. The reason why I don't pack any food is because I'm going to go out and I'm going to find and catch all my food. My answer to that was, okay, you do it. Go do that. Record yourself doing it, and then post it. Here it is. Proof. Next person. Nuh-uh. You can catch all your food. You can hunt all your food. Okay. All right. Show me a video of you doing it for a week. Any time of year, go out and do it. and then post the evidence of you doing it here with success. Nobody has an answer for that. Nobody come back with an answer for that. Why you reckon that is? Because it's not possible. The people writing that you can just go out and you can hunt and catch your food and pull it out of the ground. I promise you, these people have never, ever gone 2 days without eating. They probably haven't gone a single day in its entirety without eating anything. Let me tell you what happens when you go a day or 2 days without eating. Your energy goes away. You don't have the energy to hunt. You don't have the energy or the patience or the clarity of thought to hunt or fish your food. These people are living in a la-la land where they're imagining they're going to go out there with these guns and carrying 50, 60 pounds worth of stuff. You know that it's going to be 60, 70 pounds if you're carrying 2 rifles and spearheads in addition to everything else you're supposedly carrying. And so in this imaginary world that they live in, they're going to go out carrying this stuff. And in this imaginary world, there is no finite amount of energy that they're working on. In other words, the best they feel while they're imagining this, they think that's how they're always going to feel throughout this entire adventure that they've conjured up in their mind. And that's not the reality of how life works. If you have to go 1 day without food, the next day, you're not going to have the energy that you had on that first day. You're not going to have the energy at the end of that first day that you had starting out that day. So without energy, how are you going to walk? How are you going to carry all this stuff? How are you going to be in the mood to hunt? I remember seeing this episode of Survivor Man, with Les Stroud. He has horses, rides out on these horses. He's got them carrying everything and doing all the work. And by the third day, he's so frustrated and hungry and weak that he can hardly even fish. He catches these fish, gets them up on this log, and he's starting to clean them, and he just loses all patience. He's just starving. He can't even think straight to do the video. That is the true nature of what we're talking about. Now let's say that we're in an emergency situation, and you grab this pack that has no food in it, no real food, let's say. You might have a candy bar in there. Let's say you've got no real food in there and things are stressful, you're on your feet, you're running, you're traveling, and at the end of that first night, what do you think? What do you think? Once you get to a safe place at the end of that first day, what, you're gonna load up your rifle and go hunting in the dark? What if it's February? What are you gonna catch in February? In the dark, starving, tired from walking and traveling all day to try to get away from some social unrest or some emergency or something. You're going to hunt, and you're going to have the clarity of mind and everything and the energy to do that. Okay, no luck that night. Now you get up the next morning. Guess what? You're starving even more the next morning. You're going to go hunt? Well, guess what? You still got to travel because whatever was happening the day before is happening now too. And you've got to travel. So you're going to fit in some hunting with no energy, no calories in you. You're going to do that. You're not going to be successful there either. And now you got to travel some more. Got to load up that 80-pound pack and travel some more. It's so ridiculous. And, maybe you guys think I'm angry. I'm not angry. The absurdity of it all gets me a little animated. But then you take into consideration the seasons, right? Besides the fact that an emergency bag needs to be prepared for all seasons and all conditions and temperatures in mind. The idea is ridiculous even in summer, that you're going to be carrying 2 rifles and all this stuff, bow and arrow, hatchet. It's just absurd, these guys. These guys and their childish, completely false notion of these things. An emergency bag, a bug-out bag, by its inherent nature, is going to involve walking whole days. Multiple days can go by without any good opportunities to hunt. You're going to need sustenance along the way. So people say, well, traps. Do traps. That also reveals that you don't know what you're talking about. The guy earlier in the comment says he's carrying 1 trap. He carries 1 aluminum trap. Well, good luck. Good luck. You're going to starve to death. You're going to starve to death and you're going to be miserable the entire time. The whole idea of an emergency pack or a bug-out bag or a go bag is to keep you comfortable during stressful emergencies. That means calories. It means calories. These bags are not meant for you to crawl out of the woods like half dead by the end of things. These bags are intended for you to be comfortable and well taken care of while on foot and traveling in emergency situations. Nobody is going to live for any length of time whatsoever off of a single trap, and probably not even off of dozens of traps. You have to have at least dozens of traps just to have a reasonable chance to catch things on a regular enough basis to eat steadily. In the meantime, don't forget about all the work involved. You have to go and set a trap line. They're called trap lines. And trappers do not set one trap. They set dozens of traps, and then they go check their trap line, and they might find one animal for the day. That's after setting dozens of traps. And you're going to take along one trap, and you think you're going to live off that. It's absolutely absurd. Real trappers will set trap lines with dozens of traps. Well, guess what that takes? It takes energy and time. But the other problem with this whole La La Land fantasy thing is that it does not allow for travel, does it? No, you got to go out and scope these areas where you're going to set up the traps. Then you got to set the traps, and then you got to leave the traps. You got to allow enough time to pass before you can come back and check all of the traps. All of this while you have no food, because you were so smart and sure of yourself that you didn't bring enough food. You just brought a candy bar because you were so certain that you're just going to set these traps, and then there's all your food. This is just super abundance of food, right? Not taking into consideration the work involved, calorie expenditure, how that anchors you to one place, and if you're in an emergency, you don't want to be stuck in one place. You still have to be on the move. But you're telling me your whole plan is to stay in one place like you're on some ridiculous TV survival game show. Are you telling me that you prepared this go bag, this emergency bag, or the survival bag, with the intent of not to be able to get back to civilization? You're just going to stay in one place forever and just survive there until who comes to rescue you? Who? And you have no intention to be able to move away, continue moving away from conflict or disaster. All right, well, you do it your way, all right? But don't tell me I'm dumb for trying to explain the true nature of these things to you. Are you familiar, any of you, with a man named Dick Proenneke? How familiar are you with Dick Proenneke? For those of you who don't know of Dick Proenneke, he was this guy back in, I believe it was the 60s. When he was 50 years old, he up and went out to Alaska, built his own cabin out in the middle of nowhere there in Alaska, and he lived there all the way up into his 80s. Dick Proenneke is the model that everybody should follow when trying to understand the true nature of living in the wilderness. Living in the wilderness. You know, there's a reason why I'm not talking about just surviving. Because I do not prepare a bag just so that I don't die. By the end of the emergency, I'm just, days away from death and starvation. I got no energy. I've had a headache for the past 3 weeks because I haven't eaten. I haven't had a clear thought in 3 weeks because I haven't eaten. And every time I do eat, the calories I take in have to be used for me to go out and make sure that I can catch a rodent or something out in the woods just to barely get enough calories into me to have some energy the next morning. Well, Dick Proenneke, this guy who is everything that you fantasize about, he did. Everything we all fantasize about, he did. Going, living in the wilderness by himself for, many years, over 30 years. If you don't know his story, look him up. It's Dick, D-I-C-K. Proenneke is spelled P-R-O-E-N-N-E-K-E. Even Dick Proenneke mostly ate from food supplies. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, that's right. That's right, I'm not lying to you about these things. Dick Proenneke lived mostly off canned food and stored supplies. About once or twice a year, his brother would fly in on a what do you call it, a water plane. It's one of those like 2-seater planes that are designed to land on water, because Dick Proenneke had built his cabin right near this lake. And so his brother would fly in a couple times a year on this plane, land on the lake, and bring him a fresh cache of supplies, which include canned foods, flour, oil, anything like that. All these food supplies, rice and oats and all these things. This is primarily what Dick Proenneke lived on, not the things he killed in the woods, not the fish he fished out of the lake. Now, he did do that. He did fish, and you'll see in the videos him going out and fishing and catching his fish and cleaning his fish, and then him saying, oh, this is supper, you know. In fact, I just saw a video the other day. He said, he says, you know, when your supper depends on it, fishing can turn into a high-stakes game or something like that. Well, all he's talking about is he would really like to be able to add fish to his supper that night. But it's not like he's without stuff to eat. He's using the fish to supplement what he's already got in store, what he's already got stored away. Dick Proenneke, and if you go online and you look up his cabin, man, there's no end to the amount of box supplies and canned supplies that he has there in his cabin. But there he is. He is living off the land to an extent, but only as a means to supplement what he already has, which are dry goods, canned foods, things of that nature. So the people who know. The people who don't talk like, you guys have been watching too many Bear Grylls shows, which is complete fake. I remember back in the early days of Bear Grylls, especially in those early episodes before he got caught presenting a false narrative, he would present the thing like he was out there all by himself and traveling on foot all day. And then at the end of the day, he'd say, oh, I'm going to have to go to bed hungry tonight, but before I do, I'm going to go set a snare. And he'd go out and he'd like take off a shoelace or something and make a snare. And the next morning, voila, there's a big, fat, delicious rabbit caught in his snare. You know, so that presents the idea that it's just so easy. You just go out there and you just catch a rabbit, no problem. You just got to know how to do it, right? Like the guy left the comment there. You can just do that if you know how to do it. Why, right there, the practical woodsman must not know how to do these things. Otherwise, he would do it, wouldn't he? That person was watching Bear Grylls do that and saying in his imagination, why, it's that easy? Well, I could do that. Anybody can do that. So when I throw together my emergency pack, I'm not going to bring any food. I'll just bring ways to catch food instead. A couple shoelaces. Well, guess what? It turned out that other people were catching those things for Bear Grylls and putting them in the trap so that he would be certain to have a rabbit or a squirrel or something to butcher and make the TV show real nice and give him something to cook over a fire the next morning. It wasn't really happening. It wasn't happening. And that will not happen. That will happen to nobody. It doesn't matter how good of a hunter you are. Here's the thing about hunting. If I've learned nothing about hunting is that you will expend more calories hunting than you're ever going to get back. You know, another person I'll bring to your attention is this, what was this guy who went out to Alaska, and that was his idea. He was one of these goofy, real life doesn't apply to me, don't screw up my fantasy, don't burst my bubble and screw up my fantasy about living off the land. I'm just going to go do it. And he took a book out there to Alaska with him, ended up in a bus. I think his last name was McCandless. Yeah. Well, where's he today? How well did that work out for him? He starved to death. Yeah. Out there in the most abundant place on earth as far as wild edibles and game goes. And he had a gun. He had a gun with him too. Where's he at today? He starved to death. I strongly recommend any of you out there watching this or listening to this and thinking that I'm just full of horse papooey, I strongly recommend you read The Frontiersman by Alan Eckert. This takes place in the mid-1700s in the untamed areas of West Virginia, Kentucky, and southeastern Ohio. This is at the time when the American Indian was living in all these parts. And it's interesting to me that even the Shawnee Indians and the other Indian tribes were going into Kentucky to hunt. Why? Why would they have to go to Kentucky to hunt? Especially if they're living like on the West Virginia side of the Ohio River, or they're living in southeastern Ohio. Why on earth go all the way to Kentucky to hunt? Because even then, wherever there was people, game was less abundant. So Kentucky at that time among the American Indian was sacred. And all the tribes in that area had an agreement that nobody would live in Kentucky. All could hunt there freely. So all the tribes had agreed. Your tribe can hunt there, my tribe can hunt there, but nobody will establish living communities there. Because the game was so abundant, they wanted to leave it that way. But what does that tell you? It tells you that even in the areas of West Virginia and southeastern Ohio and stuff, where this is before the white man came in and just, overran the place. But even then, the game was not as abundant there where the Indian tribes lived. So they would go into Kentucky. There they had an abundance. Now there, in some mid-1700s Kentucky, perhaps you could just go out with a gun and live with whatever you killed or caught or pulled up out of the ground or plucked off a tree. But not today. Not today. And anybody who thinks otherwise is living in a fantasy land. If it's true that even here in the most abundant parts of America that a person can't live entirely off of what he catches or pulls out of the ground or plucks off a tree, what about Europe? You know it's not possible in Europe. Maybe you live in Europe and you can testify to this. Well, if you're thinking about us here in the United States is just like the same rules don't apply. I mean, it's better. We've got more forest areas and stuff, more true wilderness, but you can't do it here either. As a teenager, I decided to get by for a few days on only what I could find growing wild on the land or what I could catch. Yeah, I've already tried this. Remember, I know lots of wild edibles. Grew up knowing lots of wild edibles, and I was so certain in my ability to find plenty of wild edibles. I said I'm going to go for a few days, only eating what I can find, catch, and that's what I set out to do. I lasted only until about the end of the first day before I was tired, irritable, miserable, and ravenous. How many calories do you think are in a salad? There aren't very many calories in a salad. Even if you eat tons of salad, it does not provide you with the type of energy that real food does. I'm talking like meat and taters and vegetables. So I've already tried this. I learned this when I was a kid, how ridiculous the notion is. I have hunted. I come from a family of hunters. I grew up fishing every day of my life, catching and killing and eating. And it's interesting. Here's another thing I want to point out to you folks. Maybe a lot of you are hunters telling me these things. Well, let me tell you that going out for a day and hunting is not the same in nature, not at all, as depending on hunting for your food. So what do I mean? What I mean is some season comes around, let's say it's deer season, and it's interesting. Your wives all pack you lunches, don't they? Why is that? Why you reckon that is? That your wives are packing you lunches? Do you tell your wife, no, I'm not going to need that. I'm just going to live off whatever I catch out there. Whatever I kill and catch. No, you don't do that. You can't go out there for a whole day without a 6-pack of beer, lunch, and probably supper. You got sandwiches, you got snacks, you got things in your pockets, don't you? that you can eat and keep you going for one day. You need that for a single day. You can't even go out and hunt from sunrise to sunset without that stuff. And yet you're going to prepare your survival bags and your bug out bags and your emergency bags and say to yourself, I'll just catch something anytime I'm hungry, just like plucking an apple off a tree. Oh, there's a deer. Oh, I'm going to wrestle this raccoon to the ground and break its neck, right? How absurd. You can't even get through a whole day without packing a lunch along. But you're going to prepare a bug out bag or an emergency bag with that thinking in mind. It's absolutely absurd. So no, you cannot live by hunting and living off the land. It's not a game show. Like some of these survival shows you see where they put these guys down, and I don't watch them because they're too absurd, but they put them down, and some people do pretty well, but they're in pairs usually. And they're in an area where, and they give them multiple traps, and even so, they're not moving. They're not running from an emergency. They don't have to be mobile. They do pretty well of catching food from time to time, but not every day. And usually it's one meal for that whole day when they do catch something. And they might try to store some of that away and stuff like that, but they do not have game coming out of their ears. I'll tell you, if you want to know what it would really be like to be in a situation like that, I challenge you, just go 3 days without food. Do it. Go about your regular routine, going to work, doing all, if you exercise, do your exercise. If you've got a physical job, if you've got an office job, whatever it is, carry out your regular routine for 3 days without eating anything. And then I want to see how much energy you have at the end of that, how enthused you are for doing even small tasks. I'll tell you what will happen is that your energy day by day will plummet until by the end of that third day, you won't feel like doing anything. You'll be so weak and irritable, and you'll probably have a constant headache for 2 days. If that's the condition you want to be in an emergency, if you want to physically be in that kind of a condition where you're just weak and tired and you don't have energy to do very much and you've got a nagging, ongoing headache, and you think that is optimal for then navigating an emergency or social unrest or travel or having to make quick decisions, clear thinking, you think that's optimal for that? Just try it. Go ahead and accept my challenge. Go 3 days without eating, and then just take like a 10-mile hike through the woods. That would be the end of the challenge. So go without food for 3 days, and then just take a 10-mile hike in the woods with your fancy-pantsy backpack full of a bunch of really cool gear that's going to do you absolutely no good because you have no food in there, and you left no room for food in that pack. All right, so here's my recommendation for any of you interested in what I have to think and say, and if you don't mind me bursting your fantasy bubble, when you're preparing a bug out bag or a go bag or emergency bag, you must take at least 3 days worth of food. Now, I know a lot of people are interested in these freeze-dried meals, like these backpacking meals. They're fine, it's better than nothing, but it's not enough, because those do require where you stop and make some preparation. You have to have a way to boil water, or at least heat water up, before you can eat those meals. And on one of the very first trips I ever took into the backcountry, I made the mistake of only taking those meals, and I swore I will never make that mistake again. Why? Because when your energy plummets and you hit a wall and you're low on calories, you need a real meal that you can just get into you that doesn't require much preparation. And so you want lots of things that you can just eat, like they require no preparation. And with that in mind, I've showed it before, I think oats are a wonderful, like instant oats are a wonderful answer to that, because you can they go a long way. You can take a bunch of them, and you can eat them hot or cold. So if you have the time and the leisure to sit and boil some water or heat up some water to make yourself a hot meal of oats, you can do that. But if you don't, you can just pour cold water over them. and eat them that way. And they're just as good. And they're packed full of good things, packed full of calories. And you can buy them in all these different flavors and stuff so that they're delicious. And I'll tell you how I got the idea for that. The idea for that came from an Israeli guy who was here in the United States hiking the Appalachian Trail. And we had adopted him into our group. We were hiking a portion of the Appalachian Trail out in Pennsylvania. And he come up into our camp, and we invited him in, and he ended up following us for a few days. And we had all this great food and, you know, all this wonderful stuff to eat. Kept offering to share some of our stuff with him. He says, no, I'm fine. I like this stuff. I said, what do you got? Oats. He had lived off oats for over 2 weeks by that point. So this was his third week on the trail. He had lived completely on oats. Breakfast, lunch, and supper. Instant oats for 3 weeks. And he wasn't tired of them. He had plenty of energy. He was doing fine. They take all sorts of abuse. They're easy to use. And man, I tucked that away and thought, man, that's a good idea. Those things go a long way. It's not a bad idea. And if you have other things, you know, you can combine your oats with other things so that they're really versatile and nice.